Hello, hello. It's great to be with you perhaps again, and if not, welcome. My name is Jody Serbier, and I am the outgoing interim executive director for Resolution Washington. And if you've been with me before, you know that I've been creating these education modules that are really a resource for any of our member centers throughout Washington. And that includes members of the board of directors, volunteers, staff, and of course, executive directors. So you are going to hear me reference a variety of things, and I invite you to consider if there are other modules that you want to watch. Know that they all exist within the Google Drive, and you have access to them through your executive director. There are 5 in total, and this is module 3. Today, we are going to be focusing on community alignment and engagement. So I'm going to ask that you give me a moment to share my screen. And I'll just name, if you haven't been through one of these before, you have access to not only this video, but also the slide deck. So just check in with your center's director if you're curious about turning this into maybe a board of directors presentation or something to share with your volunteers. So here we go. Community Mediation Center Essentials. So this whole series is really designed to be a resource for you. Every center has been around for some time, and yet we all experience transition and turnover. It's part of what keeps us evolving. And so this education series is really designed to be a way to kind of anchor into those core aspects of our work that help us continue to function and thrive and meet need in community. So as I mentioned, this session is on community alignment and community engagement. So today we're really going to focus on knowing who you are and who you are not. And I really say this broadly to mean your organization. So nonprofits and the programs that we offer are really not meant to exist for their own sake, right? It's really meant to serve a need. We don't want to exist in perpetuity just so that we can keep doing so. We really want to be having impact, and we want to be able to measure and report on that impact and know that our work and our efforts have made a difference. So I say that because it really helps to focus us on not just keeping on and like showing up and just doing work every day, but really getting strategic and making sure that we're doing the right work. So each of us really is meant to fill a unique role within our communities. And there are several things that are important to consider when you think about what your organization's unique role is in your community. So things that you'll want to consider: your vision, your mission, and your values. I also mentioned in here that you want to know what is it that's unique to your organization that no one else does. And it might be multiple things. It may just be one. Perhaps in this moment, there isn't any, but that's an aspect that we can explore. Know what your existing or your needed strategic relationships and ongoing collaborations may be in your community. So this can be thinking about, where do you have existing partnerships? Perhaps it might be with your court. Perhaps it might be with another organization that does complementary but not the same work. Perhaps it's with one of your local lawmakers. There are a lot of different ways that we can think about important strategic relationships and important ongoing collaborations. So we're also going to dig into that. Another important aspect for you to consider is your strategic plan. Ideally, you have one. and you know what it is and you've seen it recently. If you don't, then it's a great time to get one started. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time walking through that. And then it's also really important to reflect on how it is that your organization reflects and represents the community. So we're going to dig into what I mean by that and how you can do some internal assessment around that. So when thinking about your unique niche, an old adage came to mind as I was thinking this through. I had a marketing VP who'd been in the industry for decades say to me, if you know where you've been and you know where you're going, you'll know a lot. So to me, this has always meant know your history, know what it was that you were founded to do, but also know how you have evolved to this moment. And for right now, we're just talking about the where I've been and where I'm at. We're not talking about where you're going quite yet. But the idea here is that you are anchored into those aligning principles that are all about, what you've been able to accomplish to date. And so the way I think about this is we make sure that we have a vision that feels really alive and accessible and always in focus. So this is that looking ahead part. If you have a vision that is potentially unattainable, but it's invigorating and aspirational, that is great because it's motivating and it's clear what your intent is. And if it means that if you achieved it, your organization would go out of business, all the better, right? Because we want to have the greatest impact possible. So I'll give you an example. Our center, for the Dispute Resolution Center of Thurston County, is that we have a vision of a South Sound community that has and uses healthy and respectful communication and conflict resolution skills. So for us, that means imagining that literally everybody in this community has this skill set. So just keep that in mind. If you've got a vision that feels truly motivating, it paints a picture of where your organization wants, what your organization wants to see happen for the benefit of community. That will be really motivating, and it's easy to communicate to potential partners. Also have a clear and true mission statement. It's not uncommon for nonprofits to have a mission that maybe was part of their founding, but that they may have slightly evolved from. So take a look at your mission and say, is it clear? Is the what of our organization really clear in this? And I'll back up to say, you can kind of think about your vision as the why, and you look at your mission and that's the what. It's like, okay, this is what we do specifically. And if the what of your mission statement doesn't feel quite clear, or it doesn't feel quite aligned with what's true for your organization right now, it might be time for an update. And then you also want to be sure that as an organization, you are truly setting the tone and embodying those values that you have adopted. Because really what that does is it acts as a representation of who you are and how you do your work in community to the community. So say you have a value of collaboration. Does that show up in how you work with partners? Are you truly seeking to collaborate, which means patience, putting in time and effort, etc.? Say your value is, listening for understanding, perhaps. The way that that's going to show up is that when meetings are held, meetings are facilitated, trainings occur, mediation sessions are scheduled, everybody that shows up, volunteers, staff alike, really are demonstrative of that value. So as I noted here, you really want your values to be visible. not only in the way that board and staff members and volunteers interact with each other, but also how they interact with community. And also you want to see it visible in your decision making. So that might be if you have a value of equity, then you want to be sure that there truly is an equity lens that is put onto decisions. So just a couple of examples to guide you there. So now consider what it is that you do in your program delivery. Things that you might ask yourselves are what's offered by other people that might feel similar to what we do. Why might that be? Is the need best met by them, or are we actually one of the stronger resources? And it's not entirely meant to be a comparative kind of judgment assessment, but what it's doing by raising these questions is it's letting you know, oh, we have potentially a competitor, or we might have a potential collaborator, or we might have a potential just relationship to explore. Is there a way that we can differentiate what we do to sort of amplify the impact of both organizations or both programs? Another question to consider is, what does no one else offer that we do? And the reason that you want to think about this is that you kind of, it's not uncommon for folks to kind of lose sight of what is unique about your organization. And so it's a way to kind of bring yourselves back to go, oh, well, you know what? We're the only ones that do this. And then if you go, well, how much are we paying attention to it? How high of a quality is this offering? Is it truly one of our highest focal point areas? If not, why not? And so it can kind of reorient and refocus to say, you know what, if we're the ones that do this best, we're the only ones that do it. Let's make sure that we're giving it our time and attention and our energy and our resources so that we have a really high quality product or service to offer. And finally, another question that's really important is to think about what are those gaps that exist in our community that fall within our wheelhouse. And so that's an area where you maybe you're hearing from potential partners, or maybe you're noticing in some of the news, or maybe you have directly been requested by a funder or a municipality to say, hey, here's this need. Would you guys do this? And so then you go, well, is it really in our wheelhouse? And that's an area where you go back to your mission, your vision, your values, your strategic plan, if you have it. And if it is in your wheelhouse, great, then perhaps you've got an opportunity. If it's not, if it feels like a stretch, then really that's what you want to be mindful of in what's referred to as mission creep, right? We can be really tempted to try to be responsive to community need and maybe stretch to offer a program that doesn't really feel like us, but we want to be a good partner. Or maybe there's somebody that's dangling some resources saying, hey, I've got this contract, I can give it to you if you guys will do this new program. And you just want to be really cognizant of these occasions, because there are times when there's an opportunity that is maybe only a little bit of a stretch, and you might decide with your alignment check, with your resource capacity, with your strategic plan, that might be a yes. But it's really important that if it feels a little too far afield, that you have processes in place to affirmatively acknowledge, you know what, we see that need too, we'd love to help, but it's just not us. And to be okay with that, because you really do have a specific niche to fill and you want to focus on that. This is truly your brand. The more you can hone in on that, on really embodying and communicating that mission, vision, and values, and having that really align with how you show up in partnership, this is how people will see who you are and what you are, and also how it is that you do what you do. So let's take a minute to talk about relationships in community. So, You can think about this as a bit of a macro version of what we know to be true in microcosm. We don't do great when we work in isolation. It's true as individuals. It's also true for organizations, particularly nonprofits and programs within other organizations where they're really designed to be they're really envisioned to be a resource for community and addressing gaps that might not be met by the public and the private sector. So what's true is that nonprofits and programs that really kind of put their blinders on and work solely in isolation really are at pretty significant risk of stagnation, which can in the longer term lead to failure and closure. Because they've lost their relevancy, they don't have enough community connectedness to truly thrive and survive. So, keep in mind that our relationships are what make us strong. And in order to have that meaningful impact that we all wish to have when we're affiliated with organizations and programs such as this, we really do need to invest in putting in the time, putting in the effort to build bridges to a variety of potential partners. That can be organizations that could be referral partners, that could be actual program collaborators, that can be what I call networkers. And you might think of this as those community connectors. There are some folks that just seem to know everyone, and maybe they're kind of change makers. And, these are good people to be able to have sort of familiar with what you offer, because you never know who they're talking to. And then, of course, there's all kinds of delineations within the idea of relationships with funders. Could be potential government agencies that might have contracts that would serve your organization. Could be private funders that might have grants or other types of contracts to offer. Could be individual donors in your community. They may give of their own access. They may also have affiliation with family foundations or the like. And what you want to think about when you're approaching your relationship development in your communities is that you really want to focus on quality. It can be pretty tempting to do kind of a scattershot approach of, showing up to all the events, but never really getting the chance to do deep relationship development with much of anyone, which, if we take it back to the individual example, kind of makes sense that doesn't always work, right? Because we're kind of hanging around the edges, we're visible maybe, but we're not really known. And so there isn't that top of mind awareness, so that when a need arises, your organization is the one that comes to mind, right? You want to be seen as this potential resource, this willing partner, when it makes sense for you. So look for, when you're visiting with folks, first of all, know that authentic relationship building really takes time, it takes presence, and it takes a real genuine interest. And it doesn't mean you have to do this with everybody, right? You get really strategic about what's going to work for you, and you go where there's willingness. So you're looking for, as you're kind of getting to know potential partners, think of it kind of like speed dating. You don't know if there's going to be an alignment there. You don't know if there's enough shared interests. You don't know if there's enough shared values, but that's what you want to find out. And you kind of want to get to the heart of it fast, so that if it's not there, you can gently let that possible relationship go and turn your attention towards one that might have longer lasting impact. So be mindful of thinking about those shared interests, those values alignments, and what possible possibilities come to mind when you think of that partner, again, whether it's an individual or a group. It's also important to remember another adage that really comes from donor stewardship, but it applies to all relationship stewardship. You really want to be somebody that has put in the effort and shows up multiple times before there's a definitive ask, right? Because that really is saying, I'm in this, I'm with you, I see that we have shared interest, I'm really committed. And say you lead right out of the gate asking for, I don't know, a giant grant, or asking for a contract, or asking for a large donation. If there isn't that relationship there, it feels more transactional than it does really feel relational. So you want to be mindful of the fact that this work takes time, and that you really want to demonstrate that you are looking for something that has some reciprocity. And the opposite is true as well. If you're noticing that, you're putting in the effort to be a partner, and to build relationship with someone that is beneficial to your organization, but it's feeling very transactional on the receiving end, you can also be discerning and determine what's going to serve your organization best. And it might be that you say, it doesn't feel like maybe the best time for us to partner up, or it doesn't feel like this organization quite aligns with your foundation's interests per se. And you can kindly take yourself out of that relationship, either temporarily or permanently. So when I say focus on quality, I'm saying not quantity, right? So the pace at which you build and sustain these relationships really depends on your organizational capacity. What do you have the ability to do internally? Start with what's feasible and build from there. It's really fine to go at the pace that works for your organization. The most important thing is that you're making strides, and that you're not just avoiding the work at all. Okay. Oops, I skipped a slide here. So a couple of tips for you to consider as you think about relationship building. Truly, this is not just for the executive director. Members of the board of directors, mediators, staff, other volunteers really all hold a function as ambassadors for the organization and the work that you do. So really, it's quite straightforward. You just want to be ready, and because you never know what that moment might be that you interact with somebody that could be a long-term positive partner for your organization. So what does that mean? It means having I hesitate to call it an elevator pitch, but it's basically a genuine, heartfelt 2 to 3 sentence statement about the work of your organization that you can speak to clearly, and that really feels like a connection to cause for you specifically. So, most folks will not respond to just sort of a robotic explanation of your mission, vision, and values. But if you can identify what is it that drew you to this work, what is it that keeps you engaged in this work, and come up with 2 or 3 sentences that speaks to that, while also demonstrating what it is and who it is that your organization is, then that's going to be really engaging, and people will want to know more about that. You also want to be ready, kind of put that mediator hat on that has you thinking about what are some of the great open-ended questions that I want to be able to have at the ready when I'm in conversation with somebody. And one of those might be, what is it that they see in a community that aligns with your work? And for you, that could very well be that you want to know, like, what conflict are you seeing in the community? What conflict strategies seem to be missing from some of what we see developing in our region? What types of communication skill building do you see in your work that would be helpful? Coming up with a few things that are framed around what you might offer, but that are really genuinely steered towards your audience member, whomever it is you're in conversation with, so that they can see themselves in your work, and you can genuinely get a sense of what it is they might need. So there's a lot of options about how you can go about this. it's not uncommon for us to attend a lot of events, and you might be wondering, well, gosh, how can I have this 5-minute conversation turn into a next step? Really simple one is invite them to your space. Some folks love to do the behind the scenes. They love to see, oh, how does it work? Hey, what room do you use for conciliating with folks? What room do you use when you're mediating? Maybe they want to meet your team member. Maybe they have a specific curiosity about work you do in training or work you do in schools, and then you can connect them with a staff member and go from there. If you have the space in your facility, you might offer to host a meeting of theirs so that you can let them in while meeting a need of theirs. So just be open. We never know which relationship and which moment will become the beginning of a lasting referral partner, maybe an important program collaborator, maybe a super vocal advocate, networker type person, an elected leader. It's always changing, so you never know. Maybe somebody that you saw as kind of a change maker suddenly is in an elected position of power, or of course a funder, always useful. So now I'm going to pivot a little bit into the strategic plan. And there's so many different ways you can go about strategic planning. So don't feel like there's any one fixed way that it must happen. What's most important is that you have a strategic plan that works for your organization and that you put to work. This is not a document that is just for show. It's not just to give a funder. It's not something your board does every 5 years, but nobody ever looks at it, right? Those are great examples of ineffective strategic plans. What a strategic plan does when done effectively is it really focuses your organization on what to say yes to, what to say no to, how to prioritize all of the interests and the needs, and to do so again and again and again in a really effective, efficient way that doesn't feel like continually recreating the wheel. So it's also a super useful tool to inviting the community in to more deeply understanding what your organization is about and how you go about doing your work. So what you can see on screen here is just a snapshot as a part of my organization's strategic plan. And again, there is no one way to do this, but we found a model that we tested out 2 years ago now. We took a training, decided we'd had a strategic plan model that had been in place for quite some time. It was basically a 5-year plan, but it got renewed annually. It was cumbersome and it didn't feel as accessible as it needed to be for our organization as it was growing and as we were expanding not only our staff, but our volunteer pool and our board. And so an immense amount of work went in, and this would have been about 4 years ago now, where our board participated in a program that was about 15 months long, and coming up with a new strategic plan was a part of it. And so that learning was brought back to the full board, and then they engaged in a deep process to really transform our strategic plan. And so what we use now is partially shown on screen. It's a 3-year plan. It gets refined annually, but not overhauled. And I share it with you now to say, this document in its entirety is 1 page, double-sided. And what you're seeing is the top of page 1. And really what you see is that we lead with the success factors. How will we know if we have been effective? And then we have 3 pillars, 3 columns. 1 is expanding the circle. The second is leading the transformation. The third is becoming a community pillar. And then the plan works its way down from there. First, we explain what we mean by those success factors, and then we list a couple of key words that kind of focus and guide what's meant in those areas. And then as you go down into the plan, there are keys to success, there are priority areas based on year, and then there are measurable objectives that translate into the operations plan. So this is one that's really designed kind of from the top, and it cascades down. And it's super straightforward. And there are lots of examples of this style out there. And there are plenty of other styles. So at the end of this presentation, you'll find a link to 501 Commons, which is housed up in King County. And that's the entity through which my board took their training on how to come up with their own new best version for strategic planning. So that's a resource for you if you want it. But really, what's great about a strategic plan, we use this so regularly because as you work your way down into the more nitty-gritty details, that is where you really see the actionable pieces that tie into our ongoing operations. And so it's useful not only for as a reporting mechanism to sort of tether back to the big picture, but it's also really important for that notion I mentioned earlier around mission creep, right? So you get this idea, you get this potential partner, you get this possible funding, and you go, is this for us? You start with your mission, vision, values. Does it feel like it's us? And if it does, then you go to your plan. Okay, well, how does this fit in? Does it currently fall within one of these success factors? Is it a component of how we know that we will be achieving our mission if we do this work? And then you look for it. If it's there and it actually is meeting a need you'd already identified, awesome. Then you get to continue to take those steps to really integrate and develop that partnership in alignment with your vision and your strategic intent. If you're not seeing it in your plan, you can go, this sounds like a great idea. It doesn't seem like it aligns with our interests. Then the question is, does it align with our interests never? Or does it just not align with our interests right now? And then you have a decision to make. Does this feel like something that we want to figure out a way to say yes to? Or does this feel like something where we need to flag it and say, you know what, we're going to come back to this and we're going to let our potential partner know it's not in the cards for us right now, but it's possible that we'll be able to attend to this at XYZ future date. Or you go back to that potential partner, or you go back to the person that raised the community need and you say, we get it, we see that, we just don't have capacity. It's a little bit outside of our mission. It's not right for us, but we'll certainly keep it in mind. We'll think about other partners. Let's keep in touch in that way. So hopefully that gives you a sense of how your strategic plan helps when you're thinking about all your various community partnerships. And as I said, you do have a resource at the end when we get there. So what's really, really important to keep in mind is that we must always get to know our community and our community's needs. And this is dynamic, right? We can't say, well, at our founding, for us, it was 1991, at our founding, our community looked like this, and that's what they needed. And therefore, forever after, that is what we do. We have to evolve. We evolve with our community to maintain relevance and to really meet what is expected of the organization and the programming that we offer. You'll recall if you watched module 1 that we started by really anchoring into the history of community mediation, and a couple of really important components of anchoring in are the NAFCAM hallmarks and also the Washington State authorizing legislation, RCW 7.75. And in both the hallmarks and the statute, there is clearly delineated a duty to remain aware of and responsive to our community's needs. So just bear that in mind. So there's a couple of things that can go into your process for making sure that you continue to get to know your community and you're responsive to the needs. This can look like gathering data for the area that you serve, and that can be both formal and informal. You see here, I've got a little image that's referring to the US Census Bureau. This would be a mechanism for some formal data gathering. At the end, you'll find a link to their quick facts page where you can put in the counties that you serve, and you can look through a variety of data points that relate to those counties. You could put in things about population size, you can look for racial demographic, you can look for economic ranges for folks that live and work in those communities. You can find things like geographic disbursement. Where are my high population zones? Where are my rural areas? Lots of information, with the caveat that our US Census is not complete data. It's kind of our best guess, but it's just take it with a grain of salt. There are some gaps in how the data is gathered, and not everything will be definitively included there, but it will give you a good snapshot of where your community is at. And I said informally, you can absolutely gather data from existing partners or people that you're hoping to partner with. Maybe it's an organization that provides a service that's not competing, but is actually quite complementing. An example I have is, we do a lot of family-based mediations for folks maybe going through a separation or a divorce, and where children are involved. And one of our close collaborators is an organization that serves families and children, and they have a variety of programs that include helping parents navigate co-parenting once they've decided that they wish to part, and things like supervised visitation. So it really makes a lot of sense for us to partner with an organization like that. And when we want to get a take on what are we seeing in community, they're a great resource. We can go to them and say, what trends are you noticing? How can we tailor what it is we're each doing with one another in order to advance our shared interests of meeting the needs of families in our community? So be open to gathering data. And sometimes it's just having your ears open when you're at maybe a formal public presentation. I'll attend our annual event where the community's mayors come together, and they each share what they are seeing in their community and what their vision is for the future. And that can give you some good information. So also review the service landscape in your community. I could kind of mention this before, but know who it is that is operating. You can do this by joining your chamber. You can do this by joining any nonprofit networking groups. For us, there's a group that is really focused around philanthropy. And so you might look for an organization like that where kind of every nonprofit has a seat at that table. And then you're in partnership with folks that are doing service-oriented work. Yeah, I feel like I had one more thing to suggest on that, but I'll come back to it if it comes back to me. So another important thing would be to assess your volunteer pool. Not only how big is it, but what's the composition? Does it truly, do we have volunteers that are pulling from all aspects of our service community? Meaning specifically, if you serve multiple counties, I sure think it would be nice if you had volunteers that were from those counties, right? I know that some folks are really interested in paying attention to the economic diversity of their teams, their volunteer pools, and ensuring that we're not only relying on folks that might be retired and in a position of relative affluence, that they can donate a bunch of their time. What are you doing to have some volunteers that might be really young and might be working, or might be middle-aged, raising kids, but still have a way in to be supporting of the organization? So I just kind of spoke to age, but there's also the socioeconomic component there. And as you can see, you need to think about the same for the staff team, because as we all look to be representative and reflective of the communities that we serve, it's not just about the volunteer pool, which includes the board of directors, but also about our staff. How are we seeking to diversify in all those varieties of ways so that we truly are a representative sample of the region that we serve? And again, that can be racial, that can be socioeconomic, that can be geographic. So there are a variety of facets that are going to influence how it is that your organization is representative of your community. Make a plan to address whatever gaps you notice, and then compare the demand in your community with your capacity. There's a little bit of balancing here, because sometimes, say there's an organization that really hasn't had the opportunity to make themselves super visible and hasn't done maybe as much community networking as they would like to do. Their service need might not feel like it's very high. Like maybe they're not getting a lot of calls, maybe the demand for training is not very high, etc. Doesn't actually mean that the community doesn't need it, but maybe the community doesn't know yet well enough what you do, and that they see themselves needing the service that you're offering. So as I say, there's kind of an extra component here. You don't want to look only at what is our demand in this moment, but what is the potential demand, and are we really visible, and is there that top of mind awareness in our community? And if your phones are ringing off the hook and you're scheduling sessions weeks longer than you normally would, that also is really good information, right? It's telling you demand is high. So what of that do I need to be really thinking about when I'm in conversation with partners? Because there might be an opportunity to access additional funds to meet that spurt in need. There might be opportunity, if there's a particularly aligned partner, to share some of the work. Maybe somebody else does trainings that are complementary to what you offer, and if you're feeling overloaded with what's on your training calendar, maybe you have a temporary kind of supportive handoff, right? That looks to a reciprocal relationship in the long term. So just keep in mind that there are a variety of these factors that we need to be continually assessing in order to determine truly what is our community's need and how might we best address it. So as I mentioned, here are a couple of resources for you. The Council on Nonprofits, that is a specific resource page that is talking about how to build relationships with funders. It's both addressing individual funders and potential grantors. So if this is a brand new area for you, that's going to be a good place to start. There are so many resources out there for fundraising and development, and I know that it might feel daunting if this is an area that you have not yet had capacity, but it's just important to start and to begin taking some of those steps in order to increase your internal capacity and increase that network of community support. The next resource you see is 501 Commons. That's the organization I mentioned up north of me. That's specific to some strategic planning resources. You'll note that when you go to their website, there are additional resources there. So feel free to nose around and avail yourself of what else they offer. And the third bullet point down is that U.S. Census Bureau Quick Facts page. The link will take you to all of Washington, but you can easily choose from the toggle drop-down menu, specifically the counties you serve, and then you can have at it. There's so much data in there, and you can pinpoint specific areas of interest and just get to know what it is true for your county as best as we know it from the data gathered. So those are there for you. Joan Gary has been listed in prior modules, but it's here for you again, nonprofit leader resources, because we can never have too many of those. So thanks for watching. I hope you find this useful. Be in conversation with your executive director about what else is possible. And I look forward to seeing you again. All right, take care.